This is our fifth lecture. This is the last lecture about anatomy, and we will be discussing today the ligaments and joints, the nerves, cartilage, and digital cushion in the lower limb, in the distal limb of the horse. These are so the missing structures that we have not picked apart yet. And then you will be freed from anatomy, and we will look the next time at hoof form and hoof function and go from there into things that you can a little bit better assess from the outside. But as I said last time, I really would like for you to know what's on the inside, because then you can make better decisions about what's happening on the outside of the hoof. And that is our main reason why we come together here. This picture is the picture of a marsh tacky that has been taken by Dwayne Snyder, a photographer. The marsh tacky is a local breed in South Carolina, and that has a long history, and there are only a few of them around, and this is the stallion of the main brood herd. I think he's a very attractive guy. So let's talk about ligaments. Ligaments connect bone to bone, and the first ligament is one that gives us lots of grief. It's the suspensory ligament of the navicular bone. It connects the navicular bone to the long pastern bone. And it's a kind of like a sling. And the edges of the bone are connected here everywhere to the ligament. And if you have trouble, these edges, if there is constant inflammation in the navicular region and in the ligament, these edges will start to frazzle and fizzle out. And you can actually see this in part on a radiograph if they are compromised. The impar ligament, this here, the blue part, connects the navicular bone to the coffin bone and stabilizes it there. And here we have that picture of the coffin bone one more time, just to see these edges where the impar ligament connects, here and here mainly. We had talked last time already about the time before, about the branches of the suspensory ligament, and it's just here listed one more time so we won't forget about it. These are the ones that go from the sesamoid bones to the front of the long pastern bone. And then we have in the picture here on the right the ligament that connects the coffin bone to the long pastern bone. It's a short, stout, and very powerful ligament. The ligament that connects the sesamoid bone to the long pastern bone, and the other one that connects the sesamoid bone to the cannon bone, and this one connects the sesamoid to the long pastern bone. Then we have here a short ligament again that connects the long pastern bone to the short pastern bone, and a long ligament that connects the long pastern bone to the coffin bone. And finally we have another short ligament that connects the short pastern bone to the coffin bone. All of these stabilize the bones in the distal limb. And whatever you see on the left side is repeated on the right side as well. And here in the back you can see a ligament that connects the sesamoid bones all the way down to the short pastern bone, one that connects the cannon bone to the short pastern bone in the back, and then we have these two here, the axial ligament and the abaxial ligament. And also in this picture you can see that sling, the suspensory of the navicular bone, and you can see this short ligament that connects P1 and P2, also known as long and short pastern bone. We also had talked briefly about the annular ligaments that in the back of the hoof of the leg connect the tendons closer to the bone and hold them kind of in place. Here on the top we have the annular ligament that surrounds the sesamoid bones and the superficial flexor tendon with what's in green here, the tendon sheath. Then we have along the long pastern bone another annular ligament, and the bottom annular ligament, that is ANNULAR, keeps the deep digital flexor tendon close to P2, to the navicular bone, and to P3. And this brings us already to joints. In the very first lecture we had talked about these joints, but meanwhile you have a much better grasp about the anatomy, even those of you who are newcomers to this entire anatomy spiel. We have in the distal limb the fetlock joint, the pastern joint, and the coffin joint. The fetlock joint between the cannon bone and the long pastern bone, the pastern joint between the long pastern bone and the short pastern bone, and the coffin joint between the short pastern bone and the coffin bone. And this is a picture we had seen already in the tendon lecture. Once again it shows the joints and how the ends of the bones are covered with cartilage. On both sides, and here it's the same thing. And all of this sits, we have here on the navicular bone a cartilage as well. And all this here is the coffin joint, and all of this is surrounded by a joint capsule. We'll see this in the next picture a little bit better. One more time. Flexor tendon, extensor tendon, deep digital flexor tendon, and here the superficial flexor tendons grabbing onto the short pastern bone and the long pastern bone. This is a magnification of the coffin joint. You see here at the end of the bone the cartilage again on both sides, and you see here, little faint but visible, the cartilage of the navicular bone. And then here you have the impar ligament, and this is the sling of the suspensory navicular ligament. What you see in white in between is the fluid of the joint capsule. This is the upper part of this entire setup. You remember these pictures from an earlier lecture when we talked about the hoof capsule. And here we have again the cartilage at the end of the bone and the joint fluid. And these are all sagittal cuts, so you don't see the actual joint, how it is set up, but we get to that in a moment. This just on the glass horse schematic again shows you the different joint capsules: coffin joint, pastern joint, fetlock joint. And here we have the typical formation of how these joints are made up. This is the distal end of the coffin bone, of the cannon bone, sorry. That's the big long bone that comes vertical to the ground in the horse's leg. And this is the fitting counterpart, the proximal end of the long pastern bone. And when you look at these, how they fit together, you can tell that there is no movement this way or this way. But these two, this area with this area, can interact moving this way and this way. So forward and back are the only movements that are allowed by the joints in the lower leg of the horse. There is no movement to the side. And this is not only prevented by the way the joint is set up, this is also prevented by the ligaments, by those short, sturdy ligaments that connect the bones together. We talked about nerves previously when we talked about blood supply and how blood supply is so important to have the nerves functioning, because without blood supply you do not get adenosine triphosphate to the nerve endings, and therefore the nerve endings cannot be restored into their resting potential and cannot fire again. This is a whole metabolic concept that is really, really important to understand, because with diminished blood supply there is diminished ATP, and the diminished ATP undermines the nerve function. You see here in this picture out of Denoir's fantastic book, The Equine Distal Limb, you see one big nerve strand coming down here. Then we have another one here. These are the visible ones, but there are many, many more that run in various layers of the leg and allow the horse to feel what is going on in its leg. This is around the fetlock joint from the glass horse, a picture that shows how many nerve strands there are. And many of you have heard or experienced horses having nerve blocks where the veterinarian injects at various points, and I have a point chart a little bit later, injects an anesthetic into these nerves to do a lameness diagnosis and rule out or find out where the lameness exactly is, in which part of the leg. And I always thought this was one of the great things that veterinarians do, that they can hit with a needle exactly that nerve. This is, to me, this is a small miracle. But obviously they're very well trained for this. So you see, if you remember where the blood vessels ran, these nerves run very much in the same locations than where the blood vessels were. If you imagine the hoof capsule, it's a little bit funny drawn, but the hoof capsule goes about here. And this here would be the bulb area. Definitely not a pretty hoof. And here we have the nerves also named: plantar metatarsal nerve, dorsal digital nerve, here intermediate digital nerve, and plantar digital nerve. And what often happens when a horse is diagnosed with navicular syndrome, or as I have heard it being described even as navicular disease, the first idea is to restore more blood flow, and the horse goes on medication, at the same time gets some painkiller, and then the next idea is to elevate the heel. This is all conventional. And when that doesn't work anymore, and the horse is again lame or still lame, then we're going to do the nerve, cutting the nerve that leads to the area of the navicular. And this nerve would be cut in about this area here. And in the olden days, the veterinarian just made a cut here. End of story. And within a few weeks, months, the nerve endings had found each other, those cut from this cut area, and the horse was feeling the painful area again. Now what the veterinarians do is they take a whole piece out, and it takes now significantly longer when a neurectomy is performed till the horse can feel again. However, the horse can feel after a while again what's going on in the hoof, and the incorrect hoof form that caused this problem to begin with is not alleviated by the nerve block or by the neurectomy, by taking the nerve function out. I also find it a little bit problematic to ride on a horse that doesn't feel his entire hoof, who just feels the front of his hoof but not the back. I would rather not sit on something like this. In this picture you have also shown the injection sites for the nerve blocks, for various blocks that are performed to determine exactly where the lameness sits. This brings us to the lateral cartilage. And in this particular picture, and I know how difficult it is to draw something exactly right, or to make collages like this, and the glass horse has done a fantastic job. Once in a while it's a little bit off, but in general it's correct and gives you a good picture. And I have a whole slew of movies at the end that makes this a little bit clearer. But in this particular picture here, I believe that the lateral cartilage does not go quite far enough to the front. It should be reaching a little bit more forward. And we see this later in a dissection that I have done. Not everything you see in these pictures is correct. Carla is remarking here in the question box about that a picture doesn't show a coffin bone that is ground parallel. Exactly. Happens once in a while. But that is not the point of what we're trying to show. But I'm glad you saw this, Carla. The lateral cartilage functions as a shock absorber and smoothes the breakover. When the horse lands with the heel first and then rolls over to the toe and lifts off, all this here pulls all this a little bit more together and keeps everything going smooth. What happens often when a horse wears a shoe, this breakover, because of the shoe, is altered, and the ligaments with which the cartilage is attached here to P2 pull incessantly on the cartilage in this area. And what you will see then after a good while, and we're talking years, not just so, you will see that the upper edge of the cartilage has a corner that is pulled up, almost like this, and becomes very sharp and distorted. This is because of the unphysiological function on the bottom of the hoof that really wreaks havoc on the cartilage. And when the cartilage has a lot of stress on it, through mostly in horses that are very heavy and wear shoes, it often happens that this cartilaginous tissue ossifies or calcifies, and the result of this is side bone. It's known as side bone. Not to be confused with ring bone. We can talk about ring bone in a moment where that comes into play. Here we see the lateral cartilages from the back on the left side in the glass horse depiction. You can see how they come around to the back a little bit, and you can imagine the hoof capsule being around here. They stick actually out of the hoof capsule. I have a picture about this in a moment as well. And this here on the right side is a picture from Mr. Savoldi, S-A-V-O-L-D-I, and he has a whole lecture about the sole thickness and how to figure out sole thickness and how to trim heels down, very much in line with what we believe in. If you Google Savoldi and hoofs or something like that, you will find that study with good pictures. This is one. You can see here how the lateral cartilages hug the sides of the hoof on both sides. Here we have this comparison to how the lateral cartilage sits in comparison to the hoof capsule. For all of you who are already in our school a little bit longer, in our school of thinking, you can once again see that this is a very flat hoof capsule, by no means healthy the way we see it, but that's beside the point. And yes, I see that the coffin bone isn't quite ground parallel. All doesn't matter. What does matter is the lateral cartilage is half inside and half outside, so kind of sort of the hoof capsule. And you can actually, this part here in the back, you can feel, if you take your finger and go between the frog, from the frog groove, left and right, you can feel here the edges of the lateral cartilage in the hoof. That's a very good exercise. You also can feel a little bit how thick or thin they are. And if you have, like a lot of you, too many horses, then go ahead one day and compare lateral cartilages to each other and make a mental note about how sound the horses are with the thick cartilages and how sound the horses are with the very thin cartilages. You can feel those. And then let me know what you feel, what you observe. Interesting exercise, to say the least. Here we have the lateral cartilage, so kind of translucent, overlaying the other structures in the hoof, coffin bone, and here in the very back, the digital cushion. And you see, it's getting, now that we have more structures, if you add also fascia, blood vessels and nerves into here, it's getting more and more crowded. In the beginning it was all wide open. We only had bones and a horn hoof capsule to contend with, but now we have a whole lot of structures here that make up the lower leg. In this picture here you can see where the lateral cartilages are attached with ligaments. So they again are not going anywhere. And here we have the annular ligament, and in the back of the hoof here the digital cushion. This is the dissection I told you earlier about, one Memorial Day. That's what I did. I don't know, other people do cookouts and stuff like that. I take feet apart. Here you can see the lateral cartilage going from the very back of the hoof all the way to the front. All of this is lateral cartilage. Here on the other side as well. And so you can see it goes a little bit farther to the front than it was depicted in the glass horse. Excuse me. I just have to apologize and get out of here. I don't see you guys anymore. Where are you? Here you are. Sorry for that. Probably, yeah, I knew that. We have to start all over again. Sometimes that happens. But all of a sudden my picture went away, and then I can't see if you say, we can't see you anymore. We had this happen once too often. So, here we are back at the right place. And this is a picture from Dr. Bauker. Now you need to realize this cut was made higher up in the hoof capsule. So you have here the lateral cartilage not going quite so far forward, because that is not made as low as I had it cut. So here in the front we have the extensor tendon, we have the short pastern bone, and here in the very back we have the digital cushion. just so that you get your orientation again. And this is another picture from Dr. Bauke. And in his seminars, he's teaching about the quality of the lateral cartilage and how a lateral cartilage that is healthy is not only thick, but it is also infused with very small and many blood vessels. Whereas when the tissue gets thinner and more less substantial, the blood vessels in return get thicker, and it is not as resilient and as healthy anymore. I have a drawing about this in a moment. What you see here in the back again is the digital cushion, and this digital cushion has fibers that seem to be almost like fat, but when you touch it, it feels like fat, but it doesn't come away like fat. So it's not a fatty tissue, it's a fibrous tissue. And the denser these fibers are, and the more pronounced this digital cushion is, the healthier the back of the hoof is, and a healthy back hoof is what we're really looking for in performance horses, in any horse, because what we're after is to have healthy horses. We talked a little bit earlier about this lateral cartilage being, after the horse has been shod for years, being pulled up here. This is by the ligament. This is such a occasion where the ligament has, because of the impaired breakover, pulled the edge of the lateral cartilage really up, and you can see how unhealthy this is. Also here in the front, the lateral cartilage goes all the way here to the front. This is another picture from Denoir out of the equine distal limb, where you can see here the lateral cartilage being connected with a very strong ligament here. Very good book, fantastic pictures. These are the drawings from Dr. Bauke. On the top right, you see a healthy lateral cartilage, very thick, almost like a sling. Dr. Strasser always referred to the digital cushion as being more like a sling than a cushion. I think this all works together here. The digital cushion works together with the lateral cartilage. They all go together. You will not have a thin lateral cartilage and a thick digital cushion. If you have thin and diseased lateral cartilages, you also will have a thin and diseased digital cushion. And here you see various blood vessels, lots of them, not quite so big, whereas in the hoof with the very thin lateral cartilage that doesn't quite connect down here, you have thick, unhealthy blood vessels that do not perfuse the cartilage as much as the many thin blood vessels do. The lateral cartilage is, to my knowledge, the only cartilage in the horse's body that has blood vessels. All the cartilages that cover the bones do not have blood vessels, and they get nourished by the pressure within the joint capsule. When there's pressure upon weight bearing, the cartilages get expressed, and then when the leg becomes non-weight bearing, the synovial fluid gets sucked back into the cartilage, and therefore the cartilage gets nourished. And this is an ever ongoing process that only really works well if the horse is moving all the time. Horses that stand around get very, very stiff because this mechanism that was intended to move all day and stay fluid is impaired by horses that stand in a stall or are tied somewhere forever. And we know this I know this from the sport horse world. When you get a horse out of stall and tack it up, you need to warm it up first before you can really work it, because all the joints are not functioning correctly, and takes a while till the horse gets back to its good function. Whereas a horse that you pick out of the pasture and he was moseying around there all day long, you can get to work much earlier with that one. Just a little incentive to take the horses out of the stalls. This is a picture from John the Vet. The website, which is a very good one, is johnthevet.com. The owner is John Stewart, who practices these days in Scotland, I believe. And definitely a website worth visiting. Lots of good information. You see here the cartilage of the coffin bone, where the joint surface is with the short pastern bone, and this here is the cartilage of the navicular bone, where it has the joint surface with the short pastern bone. And this here is the digital cushion. In a healthy horse, the digital cushion will make also for thick, plump bulbs. Very thick bulbs are important for healthy hoof function. Dr. Bowker believes, and he puts this in these terms, he thinks that if the digital cushion is not completely developed by the age of 5, you won't be able to develop it anymore after the horse is fully grown. I don't have such research on hand. He says he has observed this to a certain extent. I know that our colleague Lynn Williams in New Zealand has rehabilitated a horse with very thin bulbs in a fairly short time, and with judicial trimming and good movement and soaking and everything that belongs to it, has made tremendous progress. If you hang in till about October, I will show you those pictures when we talk about contractions in the hoof. Here we have this digital cushion sitting between the lateral cartilages in the back of the hoof and helping to form the bulbs. These are just two schematics from the side, how it looks from the side and how it looks from the back, again from the glass horse. This is another excellent picture where you see the lateral cartilages again, and then here the digital cushion filling out the back of the hoof. I cannot say if it is a shock absorber. I can only say that horses with significant digital cushions, I also think they are healthier than the ones with thin, measly bulbs. This is another picture from John the Vet. and he has cut out the frog completely, and you see the digital cushion just here on the edge. It's just that bit and that bit. Everything else was cut away with the frog. What you also see in this picture is that how high the bar is here and how deep it goes into the inside of the hoof on both sides. Very significant, and we will talk a lot about bars. But I think this is a good picture to see this, and he has others like that on his website as well. And finally, one of our own. This is how good marriages work. Wives get pots and pans for their birthday so they can cook for their husbands, and husbands get bandsaws for their birthday so their wives can saw hoofs apart. Our bandsaw has never seen anything else but hoofs so far. And I can assure you my husband smelled a rat when he got the bandsaw. He didn't think that was exactly for his pleasure. So here we have the digital cushion. It's not significant, it's not something to brag about, but it shows pretty good in this cross section, in this sagittal cut. And this concludes the PowerPoint presentation. Where I would like to go now, if you indulge me for a moment, is to show you a few Glassworth movies that hopefully tie this all together. So let's talk about joints one more time. You see here this notch of the joint that doesn't allow the joint to move right and left, but only forward and back. And here in the back of the leg, of the fatlock joint, this here's the fatlock joint, you see how the sesamoid bones are attached with some thin ligaments to the cannon bone. Then we can add the joint capsule to it, and we can add these ligaments to it that hold the bones to each other and also prevent the leg from buckling sideways. Same thing on the other side. And then we can add this suspensory branch of the suspensory ligament, and we have added the tendons, the lateral extensor branch of the extensor tendon and the extensor tendon in the front, and the superficial extensor tendon here, and then below the deep digital flexor tendon, the superficial flexor tendon. And again, you see how this is all now filled in with all kind of material and all kind of structures that you can now identify. Here we have the pastern joint. Let's get it naked so we can see it better. This is also a little bit of review of everything we have learned so far about joints and bones and all the structures in the hoof. We add the joint capsule, then we add the ligaments, the axial and abaxial ligament here in the back that holds both sides, and then the ligaments on the side, those short little stout ligaments, and long ligaments. This one here connects the short pastern bone to the sesamoid bones. Can't show you this, doesn't go any further up, but that's the way it is. And then again the tendons. The green part here being the navicular bursa over which the tendon runs. Now, if you see this ligament, this short ligament here, where I talked earlier about side bone, which is the ossification or calcification of the lateral cartilage, and then we have another feared disease that is ring bone. And ring bone often happens when the ligaments in those ligaments that connect the bones get stressed and get inflamed, and then the body tries to stabilize this constantly stressed area by laying on some bone. And that is what you actually can later on see on an X-ray. Also, all these bones here are covered with periosteum, which reacts very violently to insult and then starts to proliferate, and you can see that on X-rays. But ring bone usually happens here in the joint capsule by inflammation of the ligaments, usually by improper trimmed or improper shoed hoofs that are not balanced from left to right or not balanced medial-laterally. Extensor tendon ligaments on the other side just as well. And finally we have the coffin joint. Let's get it all undressed. And you can see the various bone structures, including the navicular bone, how it sits here in the back. One more time. And then we add all the bone structures to it and the joint capsules, and add ligaments to it. This is the navicular suspensory ligament that attaches the navicular bone to the long pastern bone. And here we have one of those stout little ligaments that also, when stressed, causes low ring bone. This one here causes high ring bone. The difference being where in the lower leg they sit. If it's around the pastern joint, it's high ring bone. If it's around the coffin joint, it's low ring bone. And then we add the tendons to this. And this one, I think we can also, no, this one won't let me. The next one will let me twist it a little bit more. Here we have this long ligament that connects the sesamoid bones to the short pastern bone. More ligaments here in the back, making this all very stable. And when we take this all away, then this doesn't, on this movie, the joint capsules won't go away. Oops. But here we have all these very important ligaments showing up again. So when the veterinarian says to you that the horse has some collateral ligament damage, now you can ask them where exactly he thinks this would be, because you know all the different ones now. Here we have this sling ligament that connects the navicular to the long pastern bone. This time we have the lateral cartilages in, and we can turn this and look at it from below and see how the lateral cartilages are here attached to the short pastern bone. I think this is very cool. I could look at this forever and always find new things. This here is, one more time, all the nerves that are running in the leg. Probably not all of them, but the main nerves. It's the same like it was with the blood vessels. They only depict the main blood vessels. There are tons of capillaries in the leg that you will never see in a drawn picture or in an animation like this. You saw them in Pollitt's cast, where you see how intricate this all is. And it would be the same with the nerves. And you see that the nerves follow all the major blood vessels, which you can now name in your sleep by now. And this is finally the end of our anatomy lecture. You have seen all these pictures. The hoof capsule with its horn tubules running perpendicular to the ground in the front of the hoof, running diagonally oblique in the side of the hoof. You have learned about the lateral cartilage. You have learned about the coffin bone, the short pastern bone, the long pastern bone, the distal and proximal sesamoids, also known as the navicular and the sesamoid bones. You have learned about the cannon bone and its splint bones. We have discussed in great detail the blood vessels, circumflex arteries, digital arteries. We have discussed the various chorea, the tendons, deep digital flexor tendon, superficial flexor tendon, and extensor tendon in the front. We have today discussed the ligaments, the joints, the digital cushion, the lateral cartilages, and the nerves. And next time we will go to talk about hoof form and function, and it will become all a little bit more real to you, because then you can actually go out and look at your horses and compare what you just have learned to the outside of your horse's hoof capsule. And that concludes tonight's presentation.